I'm going to tell you how the sausage was made. It was a hot mess. It was a hot mess. Let me tell you, there were people who've never ran races who had to figure it out in a very short time. It was speed dating times 10.
Hi, everyone. It's Monique Alcala, longtime campaigner, big fan of democracy, and your host for My First Race, the show where we talk with the country's top politicos about their very first campaign. Hey, everyone. Today we have with us Hala Ayala, who is an activist in Virginia and one of my favorite people, who is also the former Democratic nominee for lieutenant governor from 2021. I invited her on the podcast today to talk about her first race and some of the things that got her into politics. And just so you know, she is literally one of the nicest people that I could ever imagine meeting in my political career. So I'm really excited that you were able to make it today, Hala. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. And thank you for that heartfelt heart emoji intro. That's awesome.
Well, we've had some good times since we met. God, it's been years. It's been a really long time.
And I-95 is a straight line.
I know it is. That's a little inside joke for those of you who
Inside.
know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, thanks again for joining us today. I really love to hear about your personal background. You have a really
Mhm.
compelling story, and I know that it's really something that drove you to get into politics. So, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got here.
Well, just, from Virginia, born, bred, and raised, so if you're hearing this, it's very rare because a lot of Virginians are sort of, with military and just all that influence. It's just how it is. You get people from all walks of life that come here and reside here for
Hmm.
2 years or for the remainder of their life, right? And so Virginia is a great place. Daughter of an African and El Salvadorian immigrant, and the daughter, my mother, is Lebanese and Irish. So while you're trying to figure that out, you know,
We have
you
lots of
know,
ethnic ambiguity
uh,
represented here today.
absolutely. If you, I know, check one of those boxes, folks. I know you fit in one of them. And so I self-identify as an Afro-Latina. She, hers, my pronouns, and just I got into in politics by mistake. It was completely bizarre. My background is my father was murdered when I was young.
Mhm,
We were on welfare. My mother had PTSD. These are stories that would take way too far to get into, to unpack here, but just come from that tragic trajectory. And so, who would have thought my life story would have set me up for this kind of opportunity, right? Because usually the other story is just hardship and continued hardship, right? And
mhm,
so living that life of hardship, I didn't want anyone else to feel that. But didn't know that until I actually Barack Obama, that
mhm,
2008, it wasn't the hope and dreams emotion. It was my friend. She moved here from Ohio. She was actually my mother's friend, and my mother died in 2001. So we remained friends. So
mhm,
I've known her since I was 15 years old. And so she was like, Hala, I have to go phone bank. I said, for who? What is a phone bank? Right? And had no idea. This is 2000, beginning of 2008. And
mm,
every Friday, because that was my other Friday, every other Friday off, my son was in school. I get to go to lunch with my friend and then go home and pick up my kid from school. That's just the way it's always been for months, almost years since my mom passed away. Well,
mhm,
this particular day, she was like, "No, I've got to go phone bank for Obama. I promised." I was like, What the hell is phone bank?
mm,
What?" And I was mad because I was hungry. And I'm not shouting out McDonald's, but I am because the McDonald's was in the shopping center in which where the phone bank was occurring. She drugged me in, kicking it. If I could have kicked and screamed, I had a fit and fell in it. I was so hungry that day and I hadn't eaten. And she was like, just give me an hour. I promise 1 hour. Well, she was like, well, I'll go get you some snack wraps and a tea from McDonald's just to hold you over. And I promise we'll go to dinner. And unfortunately, my son, beings have, issues. learning disabilities,
Mhm.
things like that. Just sometimes it just didn't work out to go into public spaces. So I said, "Oh God, okay." She was like, "I'll take you and your son out." So she was up in the ante and, sort of trying to soften the blow. I get in there, I was hangry. Like I go, I was not happy. These wonderful people, these staffers were like, "Come on, you can phone bank, you can do it." And I gave them the look like, "You don't understand what's about to go down. I am so hungry that my stomach is like gurgle, terrible." Anyway, long story short, I was there for 2 hours, missed my lunch with my friend, but had snack wraps from McDonald's and an iced tea. And that was my opening to politics because during that phone bank, I started to touch on issues of why our public schools need affordability and
Mhm.
the way we treat teachers, how we're fighting for LGBTQ, people of color, black and white, all of
Mhm.
these diverse dynamics and issues that we still talk about today. And I was like, I didn't know he was fighting for women's rights. I didn't know he fought for this. I didn't know. So I was being educated with my little talking points while debating on the phone with people as to why they should support Barack Obama. And I think to be honest, some part of me loved the debate, right? The art of debate where I've got to win
A
this
woman of color
conversation.
who loves debate?
Right.
Oh my gosh.
Well, hell, let me tell you, Monique, it was already a default setting somewhere in my DNA because, when you have all of these mixtures, you wake up spicy.
Mhm.
So, yeah, and that's how it started. And then it just sort of perpetuated from there.
Yeah, that's awesome. I didn't know that story about McDonald's.
Yeah. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Well, I this podcast is about hearing about people's first race, and you've
Yeah.
been both a volunteer and an activist, and you've actually run for office before. Was your first
Yes.
race the House of Delegates?
It was the House of Delegates. So the
Yeah, why
job
don't
I
you
was
tell us
working
about that?
Yeah, the job I was working at was, the Coast Guard. I was a civilian for the Coast Guard, been a civilian. So, fast forwarded some 10 years after that experience, I stayed in politics. I started knocking doors, holding canvas launches, doing all of the things, right? And so Trump got elected. I was angry about that. I was like, what the hell have I been doing for all this time if we're going
Mhm,
to turn around and do, excuse my French, shit like this, right? Like, what is wrong with us? Like, we just had hopes and dreams, and now we've got terror. I don't think, we need to experience things like that to understand how bad they are, right? Like, my mother always said, if somebody's always, showing you who they are, you best believe them. And so
mhm,
I didn't understand America. Like, why, when we had such a great president, you don't have to agree with him, that we chose this guy, who don't know his ass from a hole in the ground. Like, I just think it was just destructive of us to hire someone to do a job that required leadership and
mm,
nothing he embodied, not even one iota of that really resonated with me or a lot of people. I'm still confused. What is to
mhm.
happen? But I was pissed too. And that's what sort of brought me to a place as a single mom of 2 kids to quit my job. I had $65 in my bank account, lost 30 pounds. I know, girl, it was a hot mess. I was mad. Like when you're mad, all you can see is red, right? It is a mission. Stay out of the way. We're going to get elected. So Virginia did a thing. We taught the nation that healthcare matters, that we are fighting for equity and equality, and that we're going to do all of these things. And we were not kidding. So people from all economic walks of life, including myself, won that year in 2017 in a wave election
That's
where we
right.
had
That was the
15
year.
people. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the year we flipped a bunch of seats then.
It was like, holy Christ, because it was like a tsunami in the General Assembly because
Mhm,
Republicans had ruled the General Assembly for nearly 20 plus years, right?
mhm,
And so 15 Democrats was like one or two was a lot, right? So
mhm,
just in contrast to 15,
mhm,
11 women, We increased the representation of women, especially women of color. And then also, immigrants were elected. We had Kathy Tran, we had
Mhm.
Elizabeth Guzman, we had, so many people who came into this space and said, we look like America, and we're bringing those policies to the forefront. I mean, it was really wild the first year.
Yeah, I remember because I started working in politics in Virginia, which is both, the best thing ever and also the worst thing ever because I think like the expectations around what goes into a competitive race are completely different than what I'm experiencing like here in Texas. They're just so much more professional, I would say.
Yeah,
But there I remember, one of my early races like in 2011, 2012 where there was a lot of chatter around around recruitment and people were all there's like people in leadership saying only a white man can win this district and it was like for every single House of Delegates race, every single state senate race, every single congressional race. But sure enough, in
yeah.
2017 it was like women, immigrants, people of color, they were the
Yeah.
ones who flipped the seats. So
And they
um
told us not even to talk about abortion, right? They said, don't talk about reproductive health care. Don't do this. And I was like, what the hell is this? Well, y'all lost your damn minds. I'm talking about it all because of the door knocking I did, the all of the door knocking I had did prior to running,
mm,
people were as real as you and I talking on this, podcast, and we were just talking chewing the fat. Like they did not shy away from, some people did, but
mhm,
once you broke it down and educated them, like what we're talking about is
mhm,
access, opportunity, having autonomy over our bodies and making those choices. No one argued that point, even conservatives. They didn't
mhm.
like it, and it wasn't for them, but they said, "I'm not here to tell you what to do."
Mhm. Yeah, so part of it, I think, could objectively be said that it was backlash to Trump that helped push everybody over the
Yes,
edge, but also,
I agree.
yeah, but do you think that there was anything that was particularly unique about how y'all were running y'all's races in 2017?
Well, I'm gonna tell you how the sausage was made. It was a hot mess. Like, it was a hot mess. Like, let me tell you, there were people who've never ran races who had to figure it out in a
Mhm.
very short time. It was speed dating times 10, right?
Oh, wow.
You had to get like we rose through either primaries, I was in a
Mhm,
primary, we had very little time. We had to figure out, especially for the 11 women that won their races, you had to walk, talk, chew gum, meaning you had to make decisions about your family. You had to balance that. You had to
mhm,
quit your job. You had to fight the status quo of just a white cis male being in office and fighting that with the general populace. They've never seen individuals that looked like us. So I think that's what made this race so special. Did
mhm,
we figure it out? No, we just ran like hell to the finish line, right? With just laser focus of we're going to get health care. And we did. We expanded Medicaid expansion. We passed the Equal Rights Amendment. We passed voting rights. We passed redistricting. We passed privacy laws. We did a lot of good shit in a short period of time. And it's still celebrated today. And people were like, you're doing it. You're too much. You're doing too much. No, we have been held back for 20 years under
mhm.
conservative reign. Now, don't let the good Lord hit you where the good Lord split you, honey.
Mhm,
You know, and we did so with dignity and decorum, right?
mhm,
We didn't come in there to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but we had had
mhm,
enough. That was sort of that empowerment. Trump was the tip of the iceberg, right? We're
mhm.
like, we're not doing this anymore. Now, fast forward it to today, and we're doing it. So here's
I
that.
know, I know. Do you think that, it's like some people argue like that in 2019 when you were running that there was like Democrats had gone too far. Do you think it was something that's like so reductive like that, or do you think that it was something like completely different with the national environment or anything or something else?
I may not, I may, perhaps I don't have the most popular opinion, but you have to govern with some discernment. You cannot just throw policy out there. So, for
Mhm,
instance, there is policy out there, like the crime bill. We didn't know the long term effects. You take the consciousness of what we know today and you throw a policy in today. you don't know how that plays out 10 years from now or 15 years from now. And this is why good legislators come in and start to tweak these pieces of legislation, because we find out what is good, bad, or indifferent about the legislation to make it
Mhm.
or create it to its perfect or as perfect as it can get, right?
Yeah.
You can't legislate all problems away. You just can't do it. And
Mhm.
not, not all legislation or issues are one dimensional. So you have to be a legislator who thinks about the long-term impacts. And sometimes some policies take longer than others. So most of the policies had infrastructure that we passed in place, right? Or we prepared for it, or we put a sunset on it. We had leadership that had been in the legislature who knew the laws, and knew what has been passed prior
Mhm.
way before we came, right?
Mhm.
A lot of us didn't have that historical context. So we had that sort of wisdom around us.
Mhm.
I don't think we went too far. I just
Yeah.
think that, you know, when you have parents and grandparents, and I'm sure everybody on here has had somebody, a guardian, that it says, I don't want my children to face X, whether
Mhm.
it's lack of health care or school or affordability, whatever it is, I want them to thrive in every bit. So this is what the lawmakers are coming to the legislature to do. We
Yeah.
listen to you. We had that historical context, or at least I did. I had my grandparents who said, why do you have to pay so much for school? You should just be. So we listened to you. We took your sage advice, America, and now we're going to implement it. And now you're pissed about it, right? Like, so which is it? You know, so I don't know if that's a fair context
Yeah.
for
Yeah. No, I
Virginia. We took what you said and tried to bring in legislation to address that very issue. And then you're going to be mad about it. I
mhm.
don't understand. Help me, help you,
Mhm.
help me, help you. you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, I think that's an important point. I think a lot of people expect things to change overnight,
Yeah.
and now we've gotten to this point in politics where it's so rigid and it's so like so reactionary, and it's I think it's really been frustrating for me in politics and a little bit demoralizing to stay engaged and to stay enthusiastic
Yeah.
and optimistic about politics, but I don't know. I feel like hopeful that we'll.
You should. I mean, we're in a lot of shit, right? Lots of crap is going on. I mean, when you talk about hell in a handbasket, it's here, but I do have hope. I've seen leaders rise to the occasion, even now in Virginia, where we just had elections and we
Mhm,
swept the House with 64 seats, the first female governor, the first Muslim American to represent us as lieutenant governor, and the first black
mhm,
man attorney general. There's so many firsts. It gives me hope. The first are important just as context to where we're thinking. It's not the end all be all,
mhm,
because as Kamala Harris says, I may be the first, but I don't want to be the last. We're going to have to continue to do the hard work. And engagement doesn't just stay at the voting
mhm,
box or the ballot box. You have to continue to engage your representatives, right? We are a democracy when we get elected, but we
mhm,
become a republic, a
mhm,
representative when we get into the General Assembly or to the US Congress. We become that one where
mhm,
we represent the interest of your constituencies.
mhm,
So if we don't vote, because you may not like us today, but you may love us tomorrow, we have to represent all 180,000 or however the amount of people that are in our district as a plural as one in this
mhm.
space. So I just think people forget that. Like, it's not that all politicians are ignoring or representatives are ignoring what you say, but you have to listen to everyone. It's not an
Mhm.
I, it's a we the people.
Yeah. I'm gonna ask you something, and you don't have to answer, but who
Yes,
who
I
is
hate Brussels sprouts. I do hate them. Sorry,
who
America.
who is your favorite politician or elected official, current or former, in Virginia?
Mm, I have so many in Virginia, right?
Yeah.
In
Yeah,
Virginia.
yeah, in Virginia.
Uh, I have a few, and y'all are going to hate me. I love me some Louise Lucas. Okay,
Oh,
Senator Pro
yeah.
Tem Louise. She is one spicy sister.
Mhm.
I love me some Terry McCullough. He is spicy.
Mhm.
Y'all just don't know. Y'all better check him out because I'm
Yeah.
sure
Yeah.
he gets an invite to the cookout. I love Tim Kaine, Mark Warner.
Mhm.
I love Don Beyer. There's so many.
Mhm.
And, I
Those are some
even,
great ones.
I think y'all need to even check out, don't sleep on this, Eugene Vindman.
Oh, uh-huh.
Yeah, he's got
He's a
some
newbie. He
swag.
showed up
He's,
after I left, so
yeah. Yeah, so y'all need to check him out. He's quiet, but he's got a great personality and he's
Mhm.
really smart.
Mhm.
And of course, we love our governor elect,
Mhm.
Abigail Spanberger. So
Yeah.
there's lots that um, we have, but my longtime favorite has always been Louise Lucas because she could, the way I viewed her before getting elected was that she was able to live her authentic self, right? And women are always told to shut up and sit down. And so she was like, "You shut up. You
Yeah.
sit down because
Yeah.
I've got something for you." Right. And I love that. I don't, throughout her career, she's always been vocal about rights
Mhm.
and wrongs. You may
Mhm.
not always agree. We don't always agree with our families. We don't always agree with our children. So that is human, right?
Mhm.
But she I just love her energy. She brings the heat every day. And if you don't understand, you will get to understand.
Yeah, the things that I love about every single person that you've mentioned, including Louise, who I sat with on the steering committee when I was on there for several years. Um, and I don't know Eugene, but I assume he's just like this. But every single one of them knows how to help somebody else, like somebody
Yes.
down ballot, somebody that's also running beside them. And the person that I keep thinking about for this cycle, there's a U.S. Senate primary here in Texas, and
Hmm.
like I had like such a wonderful experience with Colin Allred last year.
Right.
Jasmine Crockett is about to get in the race. Is well, she might get in the race is I think what she's trying to
Oh,
tell
are you
people.
spilling tea? Are you spilling tea?
I'm gonna assume just based on like what I'm, like the logistics of
Yes.
filing for U.S. Senate and all this stuff. But yeah, the things that you've talked about with Kamala and all the women and diverse candidates that flipped seats in 2017, and I think this goes for Colin too. Is that there y'all constantly or we all constantly overperform, and sometimes it's just like not good enough for people if we come up short, or we're judged harshly for coming up short, even though
Hmm.
we make competitive, like uh what were thought to be uncompetitive races very
Hmm.
competitive. Have you ever felt like you had to overcome stereotypes or, double standards, as you've run for these different seats?
Absolutely. I'm going to channel my inner Louise. And I was like, kiss my ass. They want my hair longer. They want my eyes darker or bluer or whatever. It is always, and being multiracial, what are you? Who are you? Where are you from? Where are your kids? Ciao. Like,
Mhm,
mind your business and vote, right? If you were more interested in the issues than my personal life, then maybe we would have a conversation. But
mhm.
nowadays, you have to be interested in how people are. But my community knew me when I started to run. They thought
That's
I was already
right.
elected.
Mhm,
And so they knew I was already spicy, right? They
mhm,
knew I'd been on the not the school board, PTO. I had did so much through the community. I was very integrated in like, they knew I was vocal and passionate, but
mhm,
never handled myself outside of respect, meaning
mhm,
that I didn't bring on a bar fight type of persona. I brought in a passionate debate
mhm,
about the issues, and we didn't have to agree. I could be respectful in that. And I think that's the art we've lost in America. We can disagree on something. This doesn't mean you're my enemy.
mhm.
And that is one thing that even Republicans here said, you don't have to like what she stands for, but she's never been you disrespectful,
Mhm.
right? And we've been able to talk with her, and that is important.
Yeah.
So I think there's a line to everything in the way, but those biases for women, especially Black women, especially Latino women and
Mhm,
women of color, always those are the things, do you
mhm,
speak well enough? Or You're articulate. Do you have help? Do you have enough money? Do you have this? There's
Mhm.
just so many checks and balances. If you're going to run for office, you better run for office. Just
Mhm.
run. Like, you're not going to get rid of those inherent biases, those supremacist thinking, or those, derogatory comments. It's just been ingrained in our country for a very long time. But to your
Yeah.
point, women are rising despite those challenges and despite those negative, uh, stereotypes, and just saying, well, catch me if you can.
Yeah, yeah, I know. I see all the commentary, just on people's predictions about both Jasmine and Colin. I haven't worked with Jasmine in the campaign context,
Hmm.
but with Colin, it was like this man like overperformed. He did really well in the valley. And this that we have 254 counties here in
Hmm.
Texas, and it's like what one
It's a
of the
lot.
yeah, it's one of the largest, places that where people actually live, right? As opposed to
Yes.
like Arizona where everybody's concentrated in like one county.
Right.
Um, but man, I feel bad for him because he's like such a nice person. He worked really hard last year. And like the expectations about where he was supposed to be, I thought were pretty unreasonable. And there were people, and I don't
Hmm.
remember this from Virginia, like working there. There were like county chairs and leaders of organizations saying, well, he hasn't been to my area, so I'm not going to do anything for
Oh, they
him.
do it all the time. It's always a thing. And I think it's not just the candidate sometimes, it is inherently inherited from
Hmm.
previous candidates who never
Yeah.
show up. So I
Hmm.
do think there's some truth to not just the candidate, but just
Hmm.
anyone who's ever ran for office.
Hmm.
And so Virginia, to this sort of, or connecting those dots, where
Hmm.
Abigail went into rural Virginia, where rural Virginians haven't received money or the attention, and that can hurt your constituency, because if you're not connecting with them, you don't know what impacts them. So
Hmm.
I think
That's
it's
right.
very important to show up where you can. You're only one person. So America, have realistic expectations. You can't be everywhere at once, but
Hmm.
at least try to show up once. So if you launch that campaign early enough, show up as much as humanly possible. And if you have 200 plus counties or communities that is going to represent a state senate, a United States Senate district, you're not going to be able to make every place. But, maybe reaching out early, making calls early, ways that you
Hmm.
can prepare for office is
Hmm.
reaching out, showing up to their meetings, their monthly meetings prior to launching, having a
Hmm.
conversation, and just listening, sometimes just listening, or even having town halls via Zoom while you're traveling to your next location. I did that for lieutenant governor, and it was a hot
Hmm.
mess. Like, it was, I I never had time to eat, but somehow, some way I gained 5 pounds, right? You know?
It always
But it was
happens
so,
that way.
it does. Like, I don't know where they came from, because I was barely putting food in my mouth, and it could have been the stress as well. But,
Yeah.
it's hard running for office. Don't diminish that. And um Colin seemed like a great candidate, right?
Hmm.
And you can't expect that every candidate of color has that lived experience, right? And
Yeah.
don't fault that from them. That makes us all unique, right? But you must do the work to reach out to those communities that maybe you don't have those connections to.
Hmm.
Showing up is half the battle.
Yeah. Is there any advice that you would give to anybody that's thinking about running for office, or any lessons that you learned from your past campaigns that you would give? I also want to ask you, on top of that, to other question, um, and I'll add some context here. When I was door knocking for you in Prince
Mhm.
William County, I would say maybe 75 to 80% of the people that I actually talked to, they would say immediately, and I didn't even have to go through like the talking points, right? Or I just had to say,
Mhm.
hey, I'm door knocking for Hala Ayala, I'm a volunteer. They would say, oh, I know Hala. I've known her for years. Like everybody knew you. How did you do that? And then also ask, like, what is the what is the advice that you would give to anybody?
I think if you're gonna run, well, the running for office part, it's a sacrifice. So make sure you understand what that sacrifice looks like. Have conversations, start building your relationships early. You're not gonna make friends overnight, but at least showing up, talking, I knew that I needed to talk to the elders of the party, right? I
Mhm,
needed to get their
mhm,
advice, right? I needed to open the door for conversation. And I think that's very helpful, if you're talking, even if you don't get along, at least make a call. You know, buck up, buttercup, make that call, and and they may not like you, but they'll respect you.
mhm,
That's the first, and then just bringing that sort of, one of the things I had an advantage of having a lot of those relationships prior to running. So I had built
mhm,
them over the years.
mhm,
And the way I did that, even in my community, to your point of knocking doors, was knocking doors for other candidates. I had did that since
mm, mhm,
2008, right? And holding canvas launches at my house. So they seen me out in the community. They seen me in the schools.
mhm,
I didn't know I had been so many places. Like, if I'm being honest, right? I was always going somewhere. And so when that means something to your community that you're showing up, and that's what
mhm,
I mean. Like, build that foundation. Early knocking doors is one of the best ways for people to remember your face, to
mhm.
remember your name. And mind you, years before that, I did not want to look at office. I didn't want to run for office. I was going to run the other direction. I was like, this is not for me. I'll knock doors all day. I love knocking doors. It's the best testament to a poll. You always know what
Yep.
people think, and they're not afraid to shut a door on your face. Let me tell you,
Well, I'm glad there's somebody out there that still believes in door knocking 'cause
I
I
love
feel
it.
like yeah, I feel like a lot of, people are starting to question the utility and the value of door knocking and field, and, I'm glad that you
Field
still
is
believe
important. It's the retail of the politics. If they're not answering their phones, they're not looking at TV anymore. They're not reading the news. That one door knock could be the disclaimer to what they've heard, maybe positive or negative about you on a video, and you
mm.
can have that real conversation. And that's the human contact. Nothing, substitutes that human contact.
Mhm. Yeah. No, I agree with that. Well, thank you so much for joining us on my
Thank
first
you,
race,
honey.
Hala,
Yeah.
and so, for everybody that's listening, you can find us on wherever you get your podcasts, at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, on YouTube now. Go over there, give us 5 stars, and Hala, everybody can find you on social media. What are all the different accounts that people can follow you at?
I mean, there's very few people that are called Hala Ayala, HalaAyala. Come and find me, I'm always getting into good trouble.
Yeah, love that. Well, thank you so much for joining me, and I'll talk to you soon, I'm sure.
Love you. Bye.
Love you too.